My daughter Lily had always been extraordinary, though not in the ways that get you trophies or recognition in our perfectly manicured suburban community. She was born with a rare form of muscular dystrophy that affected her mobility, forcing her to use a wheelchair since the age of 7. But what Lily lacked in physical strength, she made up for with an indomitable spirit and brilliant mind. Our neighborhood, Oak Ridge Estates, was not designed with someone like Lily in mind. The Homeowners Association had fought us on every accommodation: the wheelchair ramp at our front entrance, the modified garden path, even the special parking space we requested. But we persisted because beneath the restrictive covenants and judgmental glances, this was our home. Every night for years I would find Lily at her desk, studying well past reasonable hours. Her determination was something I both admired and worried about. "Mom, I have to be twice as good," she would tell me when I suggested she rest. "They already see the chair first. I need them to see my brain second, not my personality or anything else, just my capabilities." Those words always struck deep in my heart. Against enormous odds, Lily had applied to Princeton, her dream school, since she was 12. The application process had been grueling, with additional documentation required for accessibility accommodations. For months, we checked the mail religiously, with hope gradually giving way to anxiety. In our community, mail delivery worked differently than most neighborhoods. Due to Karen Winters, our HOA president's obsession with aesthetic consistency, individual mailboxes were forbidden. Instead, we had a central mail kiosk at the community entrance, a large structure with individual locked boxes that Karen personally oversaw. She had somehow convinced the Postal Service to grant her special privileges in mail management for our community. On March 15th, a Tuesday, Princeton decisions were scheduled to be released. Lily had received an email notification that her decision letter had been mailed. That morning, Lily left for school with a mixture of hope and dread in her eyes. "Text me the second it arrives, Mom, no matter what it says," she had asked, her voice barely concealing her nervousness. I could not focus on anything that day. My freelance graphic design work remained untouched on my computer as I paced around our living room. By noon, I stationed myself by our front window, which offered a clear view of the mail kiosk about 50 yards away. I watched as the postal worker arrived at 1:47 p.m. precisely, unloading several bins of mail. What happened next still makes my stomach clench with anger. Karen, in her crisp pantsuit, approached the mail carrier before he could even begin sorting letters into individual boxes. She said something to him, gesturing authoritatively, and he handed her a stack of mail. This was unusual, even for her controlling tendencies. I squinted, trying to make out what was happening. Karen began sifting through the envelopes with calculated precision. Then I saw it, an envelope with the unmistakable Princeton logo in the corner. My heart leaped. I grabbed my phone to text Lily, but stopped when I noticed Karen holding the envelope up to the light. With deliberate slowness, Karen used her manicured fingernail to slice open the Princeton envelope. She removed the contents, read for approximately 10 seconds, then her face contorted into an expression I can only describe as disgusted contempt. What followed haunts me still. She looked around to see if anyone was watching, then methodically tore the letter into small pieces, dropping them into the trash can beside the kiosk. I stood motionless, my phone slipping from my hand onto the carpet. The world seemed to go silent as I processed what I had just witnessed. Karen had just destroyed what could have been the most important letter of my daughter's life, and she had done it intentionally. My body moved before my mind could fully process what had happened. I grabbed my keys, not even bothering to change out of my house slippers, and rushed outside. The spring air was cool against my flushed skin as I marched across our perfectly maintained community lawn, the same lawn we were forbidden to walk on under normal circumstances. Karen was still at the mail kiosk, organizing letters into neat piles when I approached. She looked up with practiced pleasantness, but her smile faltered when she registered the fury on my face. "Did you just open and destroy a letter addressed to my daughter?" I demanded, my voice shaking, but loud enough that several neighbors walking their perfectly groomed dogs turned to look. Karen straightened her posture, using her 3-inch height advantage to look down at me. "Rebecca, what are you talking about? I am simply organizing the community mail as is my responsibility." I pointed to the trash can where the torn pieces of Lily's future lay discarded. "That letter was from Princeton. It was addressed to my daughter. I saw you tear it up." Karen glanced at the trash, then back at me, her expression hardening. "I was filtering spam mail. We get so much junk that clogs up our boxes. I am doing everyone a favor." "That was not spam. That was a college acceptance letter." My voice had risen now, drawing more attention. I could see Mrs. Patel from number 37 watching from her porch, and the Johnsons had stopped their afternoon walk to observe. Karen lowered her voice to a controlled, condescending tone. "Rebecca, you and I both know Princeton does not accept special needs students. It would have been a rejection anyway. I saved Lily the disappointment." The casual cruelty of her words struck me like a physical blow. I stared at her, momentarily speechless. How long had she harbored these prejudiced views beneath her professional veneer? "You had no right," I finally managed. "That is a federal offense. You opened someone else's mail and destroyed it." Karen laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. "I have an agreement with the Postal Service as community representative. Everything I do is perfectly legal." Several neighbors had gathered now, maintaining a safe distance but clearly listening. Not one stepped forward to support me. These were the same people who smiled at Lily when we passed them on walks, who complimented her academic achievements at community barbecues. Yet now, faced with challenging Karen's authority, they remained silent spectators. "Besides," Karen continued, lowering her voice to a whisper only I could hear, "this community has standards. Your accommodations already bring down property values. A circus of college visitors would only make things worse." I felt something break inside me, the last strand of tolerance I had maintained for years of microaggressions and barriers. Without another word, I knelt down and began retrieving the torn pieces of paper from the trash can. The humiliation burned through me as I dug through discarded coffee grounds and junk mail, aware of the eyes watching my undignified scavenging. Karen waited until my hands were full of torn paper before speaking again. "The HOA meeting is next Tuesday. Perhaps we should discuss appropriate mailbox etiquette then. Consider this a warning." She strutted away, keys jingling at her hip, leaving me kneeling beside a public trash can holding fragments of my daughter's dreams. The gathered neighbors dispersed quickly, avoiding eye contact. Only Mrs. Patel offered a sympathetic glance before hurrying inside her house. The walk back to my home felt miles long. My house slippers were stained green from the forbidden grass, my hands dirty from the trash. I carefully placed each recovered fragment in my pocket, though I already knew the letter was destroyed beyond reconstruction. When Lily wheeled through the door at 3:45 p.m., her face was alight with anticipation. "Mom, did it come? Did Princeton send anything?" I sat her down in our kitchen, the torn fragments spread out on the table between us. As gently as I could, I explained what had happened. I watched her expression transform from confusion to disbelief to a deep hurt that aged her young face. "She said Princeton would not accept someone like me anyway," Lily said quietly, touching one of the torn pieces. "It was not a question." "She was wrong," I assured her, reaching for her hand. Lily pulled away, her eyes filling with tears. "But what if she is not? What if they did reject me and she was helping somehow?" "No one gets to decide that for you," I said firmly. "No one gets to take away your moment, good or bad. It was your letter." Lily nodded, but I could see the damage was done. The seed of doubt had been planted. She gathered the torn pieces carefully, placed them in a Ziploc bag, and wheeled herself to her room without another word. The soft click of her door closing felt like the period at the end of a dream. The kitchen table became our reconstruction zone that evening. Lily and I sat under the warm glow of the overhead light, meticulously trying to piece together the shredded letter like the world's most heartbreaking puzzle. Her hands trembled slightly, a symptom of her condition that worsened with emotional stress. "This piece has the Princeton logo," Lily said, holding up a fragment barely larger than a postage stamp. "And I think this one has part of my name." I nodded encouragingly, but we both knew the truth. Karen had torn the letter into pieces too small to reassemble. After an hour of frustration, we had managed to confirm only that it was indeed from the Princeton admissions office. The actual content, acceptance, rejection, waitlist, remained unknown. "We need to call them," I suggested, reaching for my phone. "They can send another copy." The call to Princeton's admissions office started hopefully enough. I explained our situation to the sympathetic receptionist, who transferred me to an admissions officer. However, the conversation quickly hit a bureaucratic wall. "I understand your frustration, Ms. Taylor," the admissions representative said, her voice professionally detached. "But we cannot confirm acceptance or rejection status over the phone due to privacy policies. We would need to verify the student's identity in person or send a replacement letter to the address on file." "But that is the problem," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady as Lily watched me with fragile hope. "Our mail goes through a central system. The same person who destroyed the first letter would intercept the second." "I am sorry, but those are our procedures. Perhaps you could use a different address." After 20 minutes of circular conversation, we ended the call with nothing but a promise that they would note our situation. Lily sat silently through the entire exchange, her expression growing more withdrawn with every passing minute. Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed, I found her sobbing quietly in her room. I sat on the edge of her bed, helpless against this new injustice. "This is just like elementary school all over again," she whispered. "Remember when they excluded me from the field trip because the bus was not wheelchair accessible? Or middle school when Mrs. Chambers said I could not participate in the science fair because my motor skills were too limited for the experiments?" My heart ached as she recounted these painful memories, incidents I had fought against, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. Each exclusion had left a mark on her. "This is different," I promised her. "You are older now, we are stronger, we will fight this." The next morning, I called in sick to my freelance job and started researching. Our dining room table transformed from puzzle reconstruction to legal research center. I printed out HOA bylaws, federal postal regulations, and disability rights documents. Mail tampering, I discovered, was a federal offense with serious penalties. And while Karen might have some arrangement with the local postal service, opening someone else's mail was explicitly illegal regardless of any HOA position. As I was highlighting relevant sections of the postal code, a gentle knock sounded at our front door. I opened it to find Mr. Chen, our neighbor from 2 doors down. He was a quiet man in his 70s who I knew only through polite nods and occasional holiday greetings. "Ms. Taylor, I wish to speak with you about what happened yesterday," he said, his voice carrying the slight accent of his native Mandarin. "I saw everything from my window." I invited him in, somewhat surprised. No other neighbor had acknowledged the incident, much less come forward. Mr. Chen settled into our living room and got straight to the point. I was a civil rights attorney before retiring. What Mrs. Winters did was not only morally reprehensible, but legally actionable on multiple grounds. For the first time since witnessing Karen destroy the letter, I felt a flicker of hope. Mr. Chen was not just a sympathetic neighbor, he was a potential ally with valuable expertise. "I have been watching Mrs. Winters abuse her authority for 3 years now," he continued. "But what she did to your daughter's letter crosses a definitive line. I would like to help you if you will accept." That evening, our dining table became a war room, with Mr. Chen explaining our legal options while I took detailed notes. For the first time, I began to see a path forward, not just to discovering Lily's college decision, but to addressing the deeper issues of discrimination that had been allowed to fester in our community. Mail tampering is a federal offense under United States Code Title 18. Mr. Chen explained the next morning over coffee at my dining table. He had arrived carrying a leather briefcase filled with neatly organized legal documents. The penalties can include fines and even imprisonment up to 5 years. I looked up from my notepad. "Do you really think it could go that far?" Mr. Chen adjusted his reading glasses. "It depends on how we approach this. A single incident might be dismissed as a misunderstanding, but if we can establish a pattern of behavior." His words triggered a realization. This was not about just one destroyed letter anymore. This was about years of discrimination and abuse of power that had affected not just Lily, but potentially many others in our community. "We need to build a comprehensive case," I said, newfound determination strengthening my voice. "Not just about the mail tampering, but about all of it, the discrimination, the accessibility issues, everything." Mr. Chen nodded approvingly. "That is exactly right. The legal term is pattern and practice discrimination. It carries much more weight than isolated incidents." Over the next week, Mr. Chen and I developed a methodical plan to gather evidence. My living room transformed into an investigation headquarters, with timeline charts, community maps, and HOA meeting minutes covering every surface. Our first breakthrough came when I remembered something crucial. "The mail kiosk has security cameras," I told Mr. Chen. "The HOA installed them last year after some packages went missing." Accessing those recordings proved challenging, but not impossible. As a homeowner, I had a right to request security footage related to my property or mail. After filing the appropriate paperwork and a firmly worded follow-up from Mr. Chen, we received a USB drive containing footage from the day in question. The black and white video quality was grainy but clear enough to confirm exactly what I had witnessed. Karen deliberately opening mail not addressed to her, her contemptuous expression as she read Lily's letter, and the methodical destruction of the document. The evidence was undeniable. "This is excellent," Mr. Chen said as we watched the footage for the 3rd time. "But we need more. We need to show this is part of a pattern, not an isolated incident." That weekend, I began quietly approaching neighbors I thought might be sympathetic to our cause. The first few conversations were disappointing. People expressed sympathy but feared Karen's retaliation. However, by Sunday evening, we had our second breakthrough. The Patels invited me into their home and shared how Karen had lost their variance request to build a small prayer room addition 3 times, requiring them to pay the application fee repeatedly. The Johnsons revealed that Karen had threatened to fine them when their son, who used crutches temporarily after a sports injury, had friends help him up their front steps instead of using the service entrance at the back. Most disturbingly, the Williamses, an interracial couple who moved in last year, described how Karen had scrutinized their landscaping choices with a level of intensity no other homeowner experienced. Each story followed a similar pattern, Karen wielding HOA regulations selectively against residents who were different in some way. The discrimination was subtle enough to avoid obvious legal trouble, but consistent enough to create a hostile living environment. The most damning evidence came from Sandra Michaels, the HOA secretary who had recently resigned. Over coffee at a cafe far from the neighborhood, she nervously slid a folder across the table to me. "These are copies of complaints filed against Karen over the past 3 years," she whispered. "They were supposed to be presented to the HOA board, but Karen intercepted them. There are at least 7 related to discrimination against disabled residents." I opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were detailed accounts of incidents ranging from denied reasonable accommodations to harassment of families with special needs children. One complaint had been filed by a former resident whose disabled father had been denied a temporary ramp for a holiday visit. "Why are you showing me this now?" I asked Sandra. She looked down at her coffee. "My nephew was just diagnosed with autism. Seeing what happened with Lily's letter, I realized I could not be complicit anymore." As Mr. Chen and I reviewed these documents, we discovered another critical piece of information. Karen had been selectively enforcing HOA regulations against certain homeowners while ignoring violations by her friends and allies. She had created a 2-tiered system of governance based on her personal biases. The most shocking revelation came when we uncovered evidence suggesting Karen had a personal vendetta against families with disabilities. In a private email to another board member that Sandra had saved, Karen had written, "Special needs accommodations attract the wrong element to our community and threaten our property values. We need to discourage these families from moving in or staying." By the end of 2 weeks, our evidence wall was extensive and damning. Security footage, witness statements, suppressed complaints, selective enforcement documentation, and Karen's own incriminating words in emails and HOA minutes. The case was no longer just about a torn letter. It was about systematic discrimination that had gone unchallenged for years. "I think we are ready," Mr. Chen said, surveying our work. "The question now is, where do we take this evidence first?" The answer was clear to me. Everywhere. The HOA board, the postal inspector, the county housing authority, and if necessary, the courts. Karen tore up more than just a letter that day. She tore up basic human decency, and she needs to be held accountable. The following weeks were a blur of formal complaints, official letters, and strategic planning. Mr. Chen helped me draft a comprehensive complaint to the postal inspector, complete with the security footage and signed statements from witnesses. We filed a discrimination complaint with the county housing authority, detailing the pattern of selective enforcement against protected classes, including people with disabilities like Lily. Most importantly, we formally requested an emergency HOA meeting to address Karen's misconduct. According to the bylaws, such a meeting could be called with signatures from 20% of homeowners. We collected twice that number in 3 days. News of our actions spread through Oak Ridge Estates like wildfire. Residents took sides, some openly supporting us while others allied with Karen. The neighborhood that had once been characterized by superficial pleasantries was now openly divided. Karen did not take our challenge lying down. Within days of receiving notice of the emergency meeting, she began a counteroffensive. Anonymous notes appeared in mailboxes warning of troublemakers threatening property values. Supporters who had signed our petition reported receiving violation notices for minor infractions that had been ignored for years. The most disturbing retaliation came when someone spray-painted "Crippled Lover" on our driveway. The police were called, but without evidence of who did it, they simply filed a report. I cleaned the hateful words before Lily saw them, my hands raw from scrubbing concrete. Through all this, Lily struggled with conflicting emotions. Some days she was angry and determined, helping us organize documents and prepare our presentation. Other days, she withdrew into herself, questioning whether the fight was worth it. "Maybe we should just move," she suggested one evening after hearing about another neighbor who had been pressured to withdraw their signature from our petition. "This is all because of me, because I need accommodations that make people uncomfortable." I sat beside her wheelchair and took her hands in mine. "This is not because of you. This is because of people like Karen who are afraid of anyone different from themselves. If we move, we let her win. We let discrimination win." Lily nodded, but I could see the weight of responsibility in her eyes. She believed she was the cause of the conflict, no matter how many times I assured her otherwise. The night before the emergency meeting, Mr. Chen came over to finalize our presentation. We had organized our evidence meticulously, opening with the mail tampering incident captured on video, then expanding to the broader pattern of discrimination. We practiced my speech until every word was etched in my memory. "Remember," Mr. Chen advised, "stay calm no matter what Karen says or does. The evidence speaks for itself. We do not need emotional appeals when we have facts on our side." The meeting was scheduled for 7:00 p.m. in the community center. We arrived 30 minutes early to set up our presentation, only to find Karen and her allies already there, strategically occupying front row seats and setting up their own projector. By 6:55 p.m., the room was filled beyond capacity. Residents stood along the walls and clustered in the doorway. Board members looked uncomfortable on their elevated platform, clearly unprepared for the tension filling the room. Karen opened the meeting with practiced authority, her voice steady and professional. "We are here tonight to address concerns raised by Rebecca Taylor regarding mail procedures. We will allow Ms. Taylor 10 minutes to present her concerns, followed by the board's response." I exchanged glances with Mr. Chen. 10 minutes was barely enough to introduce our evidence, let alone present the full case. This was Karen's first attempt to control the narrative. "Point of order." Mr. Chen stood, his voice carrying the authority of decades in courtrooms. According to HOA Bylaw 7.3, emergency meetings called by resident petition must allow for full presentation of the petitioned issue before board response. No time limit is specified or permitted. The board secretary frantically flipped through the bylaws, then nodded to confirm Mr. Chen was correct. Karen's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. When I took my place at the podium, my hands were trembling, but my voice remained steady. Lily sat beside me in her wheelchair, her presence a constant reminder of why this fight mattered. 3 weeks ago, I began, I witnessed our HOA president, Karen Winters, commit a federal offense by opening, reading, and destroying mail addressed to my daughter. This was not just a violation of postal regulations, but part of a documented pattern of discrimination against residents with disabilities and other protected characteristics. I clicked to the first slide, the security footage showing Karen at the mail kiosk. The room fell silent as they watched her deliberately tearing up Lily's letter. When the video ended, I continued through our evidence methodically, just as Mr. Chen and I had practiced. As I presented documented cases of selective enforcement and suppressed complaints, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Murmurs of shock rippled through the audience. Even some of Karen's supporters looked disturbed by what they were seeing. Karen interrupted repeatedly during my presentation, each time being reminded by Mr. Chen of proper meeting procedure. Her composure gradually cracked as the evidence mounted against her. The turning point came when I displayed the email where Karen had explicitly stated her bias against families with disabilities. Special needs accommodations attract the wrong element to our community, I read aloud. We need to discourage these families from moving in or staying. A collective gasp filled the room. Karen shot to her feet. That was taken out of context. I was discussing legitimate property value concerns. What context would make this statement acceptable? I asked calmly. What context justifies tearing up a college acceptance letter addressed to a disabled student? Karen's face flushed dark red. That letter was not an acceptance. No prestigious university would accept someone who would require expensive accommodations and special treatment. I was saving her from disappointment. The room went deadly silent. Karen seemed to realize too late what she had admitted. Not only had she confirmed tampering with our mail, but she had revealed the prejudice behind her actions. "So you did open and read our mail," I said quietly. "And you made a judgment about my daughter's worthiness based solely on her disability." Karen's composure shattered completely. "Do you have any idea what people like your daughter do to property values?" she shouted, gesturing wildly at Lily. "The ramps, the special parking, the medical equipment. This is a premium community, not a hospital ward. Some people should just know their place." The outburst echoed through the stunned room. Board members looked at each other in horror. Even Karen's closest allies shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some getting up to leave. Mrs. Patel stood from her seat. "My son has ADHD. Is he also lowering property values, Karen? Should he know his place too?" Mr. Johnson stood next. "My mother uses a walker. Should I not invite her to visit?" One by one, residents stood to share stories of how Karen's leadership had affected them or their loved ones with disabilities or differences. The dam had broken, and years of silenced grievances poured forth. Karen, realizing she had lost control of the narrative and the room, grabbed her purse and marched toward the exit. "This meeting is a farce. You will all be hearing from my attorney." As she reached the door, she turned back, her gaze falling on Lily. "And you," she spat, "you should be grateful anyone even lets you live in a neighborhood like this." The door slammed behind her, leaving a roomful of shocked residents and a board that clearly recognized the legal liability they now faced. The HOA vice president immediately called for an emergency executive session, while residents clustered in concerned groups, discussing what they had witnessed. As we packed up our presentation materials, neighbors who had never spoken to us before approached to express their support. The tide had turned decisively. What began as a fight over a torn letter had exposed the rot at the core of our community's governance. On the drive home, Lily was quiet, processing the evening's events. Finally, she spoke. "Do you think anything will actually change?" "Yes," I answered with certainty. "After tonight, everything changes." The morning after the explosive HOA meeting, I received 3 phone calls before 9:00 a.m. The first was from the HOA vice president, informing me that Karen had been suspended from her position pending a full investigation. The second was from the County Housing Authority, requesting an in-person interview about our discrimination complaint. The third came from the Postal Inspector's office, scheduling a meeting to discuss the mail tampering evidence. Events were moving faster than I had anticipated. What had seemed like an impossible fight just weeks ago was now gaining unstoppable momentum. By noon, 2 postal inspectors in official uniforms arrived at our home. They interviewed me for over 2 hours, reviewing the security footage multiple times and taking detailed statements about Karen's mail handling practices. Their questions were thorough and technical, focusing on jurisdictional elements and federal statutes. This is a clear violation of 18 U.S. Code Section 1708, the senior inspector explained. Opening, destroying, or stealing mail not addressed to you is a federal offense punishable by up to 5 years in federal prison. The severity of the potential consequences struck me. I do not want to send her to prison, I admitted. I just want accountability and change. The inspector nodded understandingly. The U.S. Attorney's Office will make final decisions on charges. Our job is simply to investigate and present the evidence, which in this case is substantial. After they left, a representative from the County Housing Authority arrived to discuss the discrimination aspects of our complaint. She was particularly interested in the pattern of selective enforcement against residents with disabilities or other protected characteristics. The Fair Housing Act prohibits discrimination in housing-related services, including HOA governance, she explained. If we find evidence supporting your allegations, the county can impose significant penalties and monitoring requirements. By the end of the day, our quiet suburban home had become the center of multiple overlapping investigations. Word spread through the neighborhood quickly, with some residents expressing concern about property values and the community's reputation. Others, however, seemed relieved that long-standing issues were finally being addressed. Throughout this whirlwind of official activity, I worried about Lily. The stress of the situation affected her physically, exacerbating the tremors in her hands and increasing her fatigue. Yet something else was happening too, a transformation I had not expected. Lily began taking an active role in the investigations, articulating her experiences with discrimination in ways I had never heard before. When the Housing Authority representative asked about accessibility issues in the community, Lily provided detailed examples with dates, locations, and specific barriers she had encountered. The community pool has had a broken wheelchair lift for 3 years, she explained confidently. Each time my mother requested repairs, the HOA claimed it was scheduled for the next budget cycle, but it never happened. I watched with pride as my daughter, who had spent years trying to minimize her disability to fit in, now spoke openly about the accommodations she needed and deserved. The injustice of the torn letter had awakened something in her, a determination to advocate not just for herself, but for others facing similar barriers. A week after the investigations began, we received an unexpected call from Princeton University. The admissions office had been contacted by the postal inspectors regarding the destroyed letter. "Ms. Taylor, we understand there was an issue with your daughter's admissions letter," the dean of admissions said. "We would like to arrange a video call with you and Lily to discuss the situation personally." The call was scheduled for the following day. Lily spent hours preparing, unsure whether she was facing good news or bad. When the Princeton representatives appeared on our computer screen, their expressions gave nothing away. "Lily Taylor," the dean began formally, "we were disturbed to learn about the interference with your admissions correspondence. We want to inform you personally that you were indeed accepted to Princeton University with a substantial merit scholarship." Lily's hand flew to her mouth. Tears immediately welled in her eyes. "Your application was exceptional," the dean continued. "Your essay on accessibility in education particularly impressed our committee. We believe you will make significant contributions to our community." As the dean outlined the details of Lily's acceptance package, I watched my daughter's face transform with each word. The doubt and hurt that had clouded her expression since the day of the torn letter gradually gave way to joy and vindication. After the call ended, Lily sat in silence for several minutes, processing the news. Then, with determination in her eyes, she said, "I want to speak at the next HOA meeting." "Are you sure?" I asked, concerned about exposing her to more stress. "Yes," she replied firmly. "This is not just about me anymore. This is about everyone who has been silenced." 2 days later, Lily addressed a gathering of neighbors in our community center. The room was packed, with residents standing along the walls to hear her speak. The HOA board, now led by the vice president, watched attentively from their table. "I have lived in this community for 12 years, Lily began, her voice initially soft but growing stronger with each word. "For 12 years, I have tried to be as invisible as possible. I have avoided asking for accommodations I needed. I have taken longer routes to avoid showing how difficult some paths are for my wheelchair. I have pretended that exclusion did not hurt." The room was completely silent as she continued. "What happened with my college letter was not an isolated incident. It was the culmination of years of subtle and not so subtle discrimination. But today, I am no longer asking for inclusion. I am demanding it not just for myself, but for everyone who has been made to feel unwelcome here because they are different." As Lily spoke, I noticed something remarkable happening in the room. Neighbors who had never interacted were exchanging contact information. Parents of children with various disabilities were finding each other. A community that had existed as separate households under restrictive rules was beginning to form genuine connections. That evening, as we drove home from the meeting, Lily looked out the window at the neighborhood passing by. "Something is changing," she said quietly. "I can feel it." She was right. The investigations were only the beginning. The real transformation was happening in the hearts and minds of our neighbors, who were finally seeing the invisible barriers that had divided us for so long. Summer arrived with a sense of renewal in Oak Ridge Estates. 3 months after the fateful day when Karen tore up Lily's letter, the investigations had concluded with decisive outcomes. The postal inspector's findings were presented to the U.S. Attorney's Office, resulting in federal charges against Karen for mail theft and tampering. Rather than face trial, she accepted a plea agreement that included probation, community service at a disability resource center, and a significant fine. The County Housing Authority's investigation uncovered extensive evidence of discriminatory practices. They imposed a consent decree on our HOA, requiring fair housing training for all board members, regular compliance audits, and specific accommodations for residents with disabilities. The broken pool lift was finally repaired, sidewalk ramps were installed at key intersections, and the community center underwent accessibility improvements. Most satisfying of all, Karen was permanently removed from the HOA board and prohibited from holding any community leadership position in the future. The "For Sale" sign appeared in front of her house in early June. By July, Moving trucks arrived to take away her furniture. She left without saying goodbye to anyone, her carefully constructed kingdom of rules and restrictions collapsing behind her.